Well, good evening, everybody. It's Bobby Harvey on the station platform here in Ottumwa with another edition of Amtrak's California Zephyr, making a station stop here in downtown Ottumwa, Iowa. Welcome back, everybody. We took a week off last week. We're back at it tonight. Last week, of course, was Easter Sunday. Had some stuff going on with family and was out of town, so elected not to do a live stream last week. And rain was also kind of the clincher as far as deciding not to do a live stream. So we're back at it tonight. We're waiting for Amtrak. They are running pretty much on time. Should be here shortly. It is 6:42 p.m. Welcome everybody to the stream. Now Amtrak should be pulling in pretty quick. I got here a little later than I thought I would, but still have plenty of time to get down here to see the train come in. Train was early departing Burlington. I'm assuming departed Mount Pleasant right on time, so they should be coming in. In fact, they are coming in. Well, this might be them now. We'll see. Either that or a freight train. Guess we'll find out. You can hear the crossing bells going. It is Amtrak. California Zephyr pulling in now. Man, if I started the stream a couple minutes later, I would have missed the start. Here we go. Right into the action tonight, folks. Kind of an added splash of color tonight. We've got a Phase 7 in second position here on the Zephyr. Locomotive number 79. You might recall a few weeks ago, this engine was leading the Zephyr during one of our streams. Tonight, it's trailing, and the leader is a Phase 5, number 22. There we have the change of engineers for the Zephyr. Crew change point. Crew that brought it in from Chicago gets off here, and a new crew gets on to take it on west. Yeah, the train got here fairly early tonight. They got about 9 more minutes to kind of linger in the station. Kind of a perfect shot here. Just kind of admire this new repainted locomotive. Of course, number 79 is actually one of the early P-42s, one of the oldest ones. First batch of P-42s. It was built in the late 90s for Amtrak. So it's pretty cool that Amtrak is still holding on to these older P-42s just a little longer, repainting them into this nice new Phase 7, which I really like. But if you get a really close look at these engines, even though this one has a new coat of paint, you can definitely see the age in these engines. They are definitely getting old. You look at it really closely and you can just see kind of all the dents, scrapes, and kind of rust spots on them. Especially in our lead locomotive, number 22. Definitely got some rust out of the back of it there. It's just old age. These engines are getting old. This one's even older than 79. But these locomotives have proven themselves to be very reliable. They had issues in the beginning, just like any new locomotive, but the past almost 30 years, these engines have been kicking. They have proved themselves to be very good, very reliable, and they're probably not going anywhere anytime soon. The ones that are still going are probably going to go as long as they can. Which is good, regardless of whatever new locomotives come out. The Genesis will always be my favorite Amtrak locomotive, without a doubt, hands down. And you've got to get pictures of these Phase 5 locomotives. Even though we've been staring at this somewhat bland paint scheme for the past 20 plus years, eventually Phase 5 engines will be a rarity. All the surviving P-42s will be repainted into Phase 7. So you got to take pictures of these engines, even though we've been taking pictures of them for 20 years. They're not going to be around forever. So it's kind of cool that Phase 5 is leading tonight's trade. Well, it looks like most of the passengers have left the platform already. Conductors probably just gave a verbal all-award call, and they're probably going to get out of here right on time. Still got about 5 minutes. Yep, looks like it's just the lead conductor on the platform now. I heard something on my radio. It's actually the CPKC dispatcher, so that does not apply to us here at the station. Yeah, Robert's posting right now. He says they look like they're well maintained, and they are. They really are. I mean, at this point, they're just getting old. That's the only thing they have going against them now. Is they're just getting old. I never thought I'd say that a Genesis engine is getting old, but here we are. They sure look good in the Phase 7, though. Yep, the platform is completely clear. A little different than what we've been used to seeing here. Guess when they get here early enough, they can just get right out of town. Have plenty of time for the passengers to walk the platform and get up on the train long before they have to whistle off. So they may not even whistle off today. They might just go. Got about 3 minutes for departure. So, with everybody off the platform, we'll get a quick look at the station there. We'll go ahead and pan back around to the lead engine. As we get ready to go. Minutes to departure, the California Zephyr. They got in here pretty early tonight. I like being up here next to the engines because you just get to hear the great old sound of these GE FDL diesel engines. They have a very distinct sound that you will no longer hear when these engines are no longer on this train. It's a definite Amtrak sound. Probably the most distinct sound. And off we go. Right on time. And off they go into the west. Amtrak's California Zephyr departing promptly at 6:57 p.m. tonight, right on schedule. Just feels great to see the train just pulling out of the station right on time. Off they go. So welcome everybody to the stream. Amtrak's already come and gone, so go ahead and reverse the stream if you guys have just joined in. Amtrak showed up less than 2 minutes into the stream tonight, and pretty good station stop tonight. Very prompt, right in, right out. Passengers had plenty of time to walk the platform, and the conductors got everybody on the train without a whistle off. So there was plenty of time to put them back on before then, and right at the timetable time, they're out of here. It is great to be on a train that is running right on time. You feel like a king. You really do. If you're a passenger on an on-time train, you feel like royalty. Not really sure why, but it just seems like, I mean, that's railroading. Sometimes everything goes right, and it just feels great. I've been on many Amtrak trains, including the Zephyr, that's been running right on time, and it's great. You feel like you're flying. And in contrast, I've also been on many several hours late passenger trains. And it might seem discouraging, but if you're a train enthusiast, it just means you're getting your money's worth. The only time it's discouraging to be on a train that's running late is when you are stopped somewhere for hours, and that has happened to me before. It's kind of you get really antsy being on a train that's stopped for hours in the middle of nowhere. The most recent time that happened to me was actually about 5 years ago now, or 6 years ago. I was coming back from a photo expedition out in California, actually wrapping up some of my California Zephyr footage, which I'm working on right now for a documentary of this California Zephyr from Chicago all the way to San Francisco. My last little expedition I did out west to get some footage for that video was back in 2019. And that was the last time I incurred a very significant heavy delay on an Amtrak train. We were stopped in Melrose, Iowa for, I'd like to say, maybe 2.5 hours. There was a lot of flooding at the time, and we actually detoured through Omaha and Council Bluffs. And that, we lost a lot of time doing that, but we were still kind of limping along. We got back to the main line at Pacific Junction and started moving. And then at Melrose, we lost so much time between Lincoln and there that the crew that got on the train at Lincoln actually reached their hours of service, and they had to stop the train. The crew from Ottumwa had to be vanned out to Melrose to recrew the train and then bring it back in to Ottumwa. So that took some time. And we were sitting there at Melrose for, I'd like to say it was at least 2 hours or more, waiting for the crew to bring us back to Ottumwa. By the time we finally got to Ottumwa, the eastbound Zephyr scheduled arrival time is 9 o'clock, 9:09. At least it used to be. I think it still is. We didn't get here until about 6 p.m. So we were running about 9 hours late. But it was prior to that, it was a pretty smooth trip. But then I woke up that morning just east of Lincoln, and we were actually stopped, and the sun was coming up, and I'm like, well, something's wrong, because we're still in Nebraska and the sun's coming up. We should be in Iowa by now, and there was a lot of flooding around Omaha, so we had to make that detour. All that stuff happened. That's railroading. Sometimes everything goes right and it seems great, and other times one thing goes wrong and then everything goes wrong, and it's just the domino effect. Generally speaking, though, had a lot of great experiences on Amtrak. Definitely recommend it to anybody who hasn't ridden Amtrak. Give it a try. It's a great way to see the country. It's a great way to get to where you need to go. But just like any traveling, you got to prepare for potential delays and unexpected things that happen down the line. A lot of people don't go into a train ride not thinking that anything could go wrong. And of course, that's essentially Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will. And if you're not expecting it, then something will happen every time. So people don't expect things to happen, and then something does, and then they're like, oh, I'm never riding a train again. It's like, well, a lot of this isn't even Amtrak's fault. It's just stuff happens along the tracks. And, you know, it's no different than the airlines where, you know, there might be a storm and your plane might get canceled, plane might get delayed. That happens all the time. No different than traveling by car. You might get a flat tire. You might have to be stopped in traffic. You might get in a wreck. I mean, God forbid, of course, but I mean, it might happen. You're more likely to get in a car accident than you are in pretty much any other mode of transportation combined. So, I mean, anytime you travel, you got to plan for unexpected things to happen. So when it does happen, it doesn't ruin your trip. Give yourself some extra days, especially if you're taking the train through Chicago. If you're making connections, it's probably a good idea to plan on spending a night in Chicago. That way, if your train's really late, you don't have to worry about missing your connection. And, you know, you want to spend the day, at least a day or an overnight in Chicago if you're traveling across country, because Chicago is a great place to stop and take in the sights. A lot of them are walking distance from Union Station in Chicago. So, we are here on the platform in Ottumwa. Amtrak just left the station about 8 minutes ago now, 7 minutes ago. So we're gonna just stick around here and chat with you guys. Maybe some other trains will come by, maybe not. We'll see what happens. We'll keep things rolling for another 10-15 minutes at least. Maybe some other trains will come by, maybe not, but here we are. For anybody that's just joining us now, just back up the stream to about 2 minutes in, and you'll be able to see the Zephyr come in and depart. So before I start chatting with you guys, I'm going to check our signals to the east and the west and see if the dispatchers have anything else lined up. Okay, the eastbound signals are dark, so probably no eastbounds. Westbound signals are still lit, but they are all red. We'll see if that changes. At any rate, here we are. All right, so let's go through the chat here. Let's go back up to the very beginning. Nate, Dakota are here. Aaron's Trains. Joshua's here. Says waiting for Phase 7 locomotives to be released. More to operate for Amtrak. We got to see one tonight, so it's always a treat. Still, there aren't very many of those out, but there's more and more every month. I think the most recent release from Beech Grove to have the Phase 7 paint scheme is P42 number 180. I think it has Phase 7 paint now. There are several others. I mean, I used to keep track. I guess it was it last year or the year before? I think it was last year when they started rolling out in Phase 7. I used to keep track of all the engines that have been repainted, but now there's been several more, and I've kind of lost track. 79, the one we saw tonight, was another recent Phase 7 repaint. There's several others, though. I think 67? I think 67 is in Phase 7. I think it's the lowest numbered P42 to receive Phase 7 so far. And it is encouraging to see those earlier P42s be repainted. They must be fairly reliable. You would think that Amtrak would start retiring the older ones first, but so far it's just kind of probably whichever one needs to go in for repairs or repaint or maintenance, scheduled maintenance and inspections. I think the highest numbered P42 to get Phase 7 is 180. Well, 180 is one of them. It's one of the recent. I think it's the most recent one that's been repainted. 186, maybe. I'm not sure. So, like I say, there's been so many now. I've lost track. 167, 138, I think. 82. 174 was the very first one. and I actually got to see it on its first revenue trip west on the Zephyr last year. Yeah, there's several. All right, back to the chat. Yeah, A-Train commented, and I did notice this. There was one of the front hatches on the second locomotive on the Zephyr tonight, number 79, was open. And I think that is a sand hatch. Those two little square hatches that are on the nose of the P-42s, kind of right in between the number board and the headlights. Those two boxes on either side of that, I think those are the sand hatches. And yes, it was open. I'm sure there's probably a cap under there too, so if there's any weather, it probably won't get into anything. That would be kind of bad to have a sand, your entire sand hatch to be wet. The sand probably wouldn't work as well, or it probably wouldn't be able to be applied to the rails very well. Traction, it probably would work pretty good, which is exactly what sand is used for on locomotives, is to give extra traction up and down hills and on wet track. Yeah, A-Train also comments, I was talking about the Genesis engines getting old. He said, I like to think a good number of them will make it to museums. It's not guaranteed. I'm trying to think, are there any Genesis locomotives in museums yet, or have been donated to museums? I don't think so. But I'm sure there will be several preserved when that time comes. And I guarantee you that probably one of the museums that will get one is the Illinois Railroad Museum in Union, Illinois. I guarantee you they probably are going to be knocking on Amtrak's door asking for one, and they're probably going to get one. Now, one museum that comes to mind, the previous standard Amtrak locomotive before Genesis, I'm sure many of you know, was the very famous and reliable, probably one of the most recognizable engines of Amtrak, the old F40s. Many of those have been preserved in museums, and one museum where there's actually one that you can ride behind that is operational is out at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento, California. They actually have an operable former Amtrak F40 that they run occasionally on their tourist trains. There are other museums that have them too, and I think there's several other operating ones across the country. But obviously, you can still see F40s in service today on other railroads. Commuter railroads still run them. One of the ones around here, of course, is Metra. They still have tons of F40s running. But probably not for long. You never know when they're going to phase those out. But I think Metra actually has bigger fish to fry right now. They're kind of scrounging for money at the moment. So they're probably not going to get rid of any F40s for a long time. Both was here. Hello. Jackie Lee commented, said that it was on the Empire Builder last summer. They slowed the train down to half speed because of extreme heat for several hours. Liked having those extra hours on the train at slower speeds. Yep. And they do that in summertime when it gets really hot. The continuous welded track, welded rails like is through Ottumwa, for example, when it gets really hot, the sun can actually cause kinks in the rails. And as you might expect, that's a very dangerous situation for trains. So they run trains at half speed or sometimes even restricted speed, depending on how warm it really is, just so the engineer can watch out for any potential kinks in the rails when it's really hot. That happens a lot to continuous welded rail like this because it's in such long sections that there's plenty of room for, the expansion and contraction in hot weather and changes in weather. Now, the older rail, jointed rail, where the rails jointed together in shorter sections, It doesn't have that problem because there's not enough, the rail segments aren't long enough to create problems like that. But it's a much rougher ride for trains, and it's a lot harder on the rails. So that's why you don't really see jointed rail very much anymore. But even welded rail has joints ever so often, because obviously you can only make a rail so long before you have to put some kind of a joint in it. And I think signals and, you know, crossing gates and things like that, I think a lot of times there's joints in the rails around signals so that they can wire them up to the track and things like that. There's a lot of the crossing gates now are controlled by, you know, I don't know if they're controlled by satellite necessarily, but there's different ways of activating them now than just the brakes and joints in the track. And Kirk asks again, I remember he asked in the last stream, when's the next car drive live stream? Well, I'm not sure, but I am going to do them again. Not sure when. Probably once I charge my little speakers up and have a day where I have a little more time to venture around. Like tonight, for example, if we were doing one of those streams, we probably would have been able to get a southbound CPKC train. Now, speaking of the CPKC, the northbound 181 train today had one of their brand new CPKC painted Tier 4 locomotives on the front. I have yet to get a video of one of those leading a train in motion, but pretty neat engines. And one of those was leading the northbound intermodal train 181 earlier this afternoon. I saw it. My wife and I were out shopping, and I saw it from afar in the train yard. But yeah, if we were doing one of those streams, or I'm in the car driving around looking for any trains that are around, we would have seen a southbound CPKC train. Not sure what train it was, but it was something in the yard that they were getting their track warrant to go when Amtrak was in the station here earlier. Did a quick check of the signals again. Everything's still red. Yeah, Kirk says, I didn't mean to ask again. I was only interested. That's okay. Glad you're interested. I'm glad people enjoy those videos. They're pretty fun to make. So are these. But yes, I am planning on doing more of those. I'd like to do at least one a month, but we'll see. It just depends on how much more time I have to actually do one of those. Those videos I like to be on for, you know, like an hour and a half or so. These, you know, these Amtrak station stop videos could be anywhere between 30 minutes to 50 minutes, a little shorter. Dakota says you should rail fan the Burlington Junction sometime. He was lucky to catch 714, which is the Burlington Junction engine down here just east of us in the yard, working for a bit. Yep. I've gotten the Burlington Junction a few times here and there over the years. It's pretty fun to watch, but you have to be down there just at the right time. And sometimes they can start pretty early. Sometimes like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. A lot of times they're running when Amtrak's coming in the morning if they're on time. But it's very early. They do their work in the morning, and then they tie up the engine and go to another job. I think a lot of times the crews that run the train here in Ottumwa on the Burlington Junction, they also go and work the yards in Burlington and probably Mount Pleasant too. Burlington Junction has some other operations in those towns too. Pretty much the same thing, just yard switching, getting cars staged for BNSF to take out on trains, and also switching the industries. And it's kind of a way for them to run the industries, and then BNSF doesn't really have to worry about that. They just pick up and drop off the cars. And Burlington Junction can take them the rest of the way into the businesses and industries. There's quite a few in Burlington. There's a lot of them in Burlington. And there's, I like to say there's probably two or three in Mount Pleasant. And here in Ottumwa, we have JBS and Lineage, and I think that's all that Burlington Junction serves, but that's, you know, a pretty significant amount of traffic. There's also a scrapyard that receives scrap metal, that sends scrap metal out in gondolas and hopper cars, but that siding is on the other side of the little rail yard here in Ottumwa, so the BNSF local crews still serve that. Iowa Trains comments that Amtrak engine 196 is in phase 7. So that's probably the newest P42 that has phase 7. Of course, on Amtrak, they go all the way up to engine number 207. 1 to 207. So 208, or excuse me, 207 P42s that Amtrak owns. And at one time they had 45 P40s. Of course, a lot of those have been retired and sold to other railroads. And they have 18 dual mode P32 ACDM locomotives that are also a Genesis variant. And those are only used in the Northeast, kind of around New York City and up along the Empire Corridor and some of those trains up there. You never see those in the Midwest. They're only in the Northeast. I'm not sure I've ever seen one of those engines. I will someday whenever I venture east of Chicago. I have not been east of Chicago in the United States since 1994, believe it or not. 31 years. I'll get back out there sometime. Yep, Kirk has commented that Metro, New Jersey Transit, Metro North, ACE, which I think is the, I don't know if I pronounced this right, but the Altamont Commuter Express, and the T in Boston, Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, are commuter railroads that have the F40s that are still running. Some other ones I can think of, Trinity Railway Express in Dallas has a couple of F40s that they bought secondhand. And several others. But there's still plenty of F40s around. And as A-Train commented up here, and I agree that it seems like there are not enough F40s in museums. And it is kind of amazing, as prevalent as those engines were and still are, that there aren't more. But that's probably why there aren't many in museums yet, because they're still out running on the railroads. Another example, you won't see very many SD40-2 freight locomotives in museums because the railroads still have them. They're not used on mainline trains anymore, usually, but all the Class 1s still have them, and a lot of short lines do, so they're still being used. So I don't know if there are really any SD40-2s that have been preserved in museums yet, because they're still out working for the railroads. Kirk asked, did they replace the defect detectors on CP Casey's line close to Ottumwa? As far as I know, that they're still the same. They still announce as CP. And I don't think the railroads are usually very fast at replacing the voices on those. For an example, the IC&E, it still said there were a couple detectors south of Ottumwa that still said IC&E in the synthesized voice right through 2012, which was 4 years after CP bought the IC&E lines. They still said IC&E on the defect detectors, and I was actually able to capture a few of those on video when I first started chasing the CP trains down the line in 2010. So they're probably not in a big hurry to change those, but eventually they will. Now, Tim Jacobs asks if I'm going to be able to stop over in Mount Pleasant during the weekend of the swap meet. What weekend is that? I saw that. Is it the end of June? Or is it the end of May or June? I don't remember when that was, but I remember seeing on Facebook that that was happening. There's a swap meet at the old Threshers grounds in Mount Pleasant, and the Midwest Electric Railroad is going to be giving free trolley rides. So that's probably our first chance to get a look and a ride on the new streetcar on the Midwest Electric, number 1811. Looking forward to seeing that one at Old Threshers. But, yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to make it over there or not, but to figure out what weekend it is first. But yeah, Kirk says after the Empire Build a Route documentary, should do a documentary on the Coast Starlight. I've actually gotten quite a few requests for the Coast Starlight on my YouTube channel. After I made the Southwest Chief documentary, gotten quite a few comments that said you should do the Coast Starlight next, and I would like to do that one, but it would require a lot more travel than the Southwest Chief or the California Zephyr. They're pretty easy to get on and drive down and document because they're closer to home. Coast Starlight, for the entire video, onboard and trackside, I would have to commute, or I would have to travel to California and the West Coast. But it is a shorter train than the Southwest Chief and the California Zephyr. It is only a single night train. Or is it? Yeah, it's just a single night train. It's only a 2-day train ride as opposed to the Zephyr and the Chief, which are 2.5-day rides over the course of 3 days and 2 nights. So video-wise, it'd be a little easier to make because you're not on the train as long, but it's much further away. So it'd take a lot of traveling to get there before I even did any filming. Another one I'd like to do, which, I may or may not have time to do any of these, but the Floridian, the new Floridian train, the combination of the Capital Limited and Silver Meteor train. It'd be neat to do a documentary on that one. But I'd just be happy to get this Zephyr documentary off the ground, which I will. And most likely it'll be the only big video that I get done before Old Threshers this year. Because this one's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work to get this one up and on YouTube and everything. So, and I'm taking my time. I want this one to be a really good video. So I suspect it will probably take me quite a few months to make. And by that time, 3 months from now is, pretty much the end of July, and the Old Threshers reunion is about a month away. So, but we'll see. We'll see how much time I have to work on it in the next few months. But that is my next big video, along with these live streams that I'm trying to do every week. Now, next week, as far as live streams go, I might do a pair of live streams next week, because May 1st is the it is the 54th anniversary of the first Amtrak's birthday. The Amtrak began on May 1st, 1971. So this will be the 54th anniversary of the first day of Amtrak operations. So, depending on time, might come down here and do one of these station stop videos on Amtrak's birthday as kind of a celebration. That is this Thursday, so we'll have to see how that goes. May or may not do that, but I'm going to try. And then, of course, I'll probably do my usual stream on Sunday evening. So just be on the lookout for that. So as far as the weather goes today, it's kind of chilly and cloudy. Kind of a change from what we've had the past few days. It's been really nice. It's still springtime, though, so we're going to have these dips in temperature. But it's actually pretty chilly tonight. A little windy. Okay. I'm going to look at the signals one more time just to make sure nothing's lined up. all red to the west, no signals lit to the east. So we'll go ahead and chat for just a few more minutes and then probably wrap things up for tonight. I guess I'm about caught up. Dakota asks, still like to see the O gauge. I will get to that too, but my train layout is going through another transformation. So I won't be able to do an O gauge stream for a little while, probably for many months. Not really going to divulge too much on what's going on quite yet, but because I kind of want it to be a surprise. But my O gauge layout is in the process of being dismantled yet again. But it's going to go back up, and it's going to be even bigger and better than the existing layout that none of you saw. I did a live stream of my O gauge trains a couple years ago, the first time I did these streams in 2023. And it was kind of the old configuration of my layout that I brought down from the bedrooms, the top of our house, to the basement. And it didn't, I was able to move it down in the same configuration, but it just didn't work very well in the basement. So later that year, around Christmas time, I took the whole layout apart and put it back together and made a whole new layout out of the materials and track that I had. Made a much better track layout, and it was pretty neat. I was able to, actually ran it quite a bit in its the current state, and I was actually still working on getting some of the roads and things put up and trying to figure out what exactly I was going to do with the rest of it. But I have current events have allowed me to resituate the layout, so to speak, one more time, and that's what I'm doing. So right now I'm in the process of taking down the layout, and then it's going to go back up in a totally different state, totally new layout in the next few months, hopefully. So I'm going to do some videos on my O gauge trains, probably just some normal uploads too of my O gauge adventures, not just live streams, but that is definitely in the works in the future. So stay tuned for that. Now, Kirk has given me a bunch of suggestions for Amtrak trip documentaries, and I'd love to do all of them someday, but that's going to take a lot of time. But I'd love to just ride some of these someday. The Empire Builder, that's another one that I've gotten several requests for, and I'd like to do. And I would actually do that one from Seattle going east, because usually my documentaries begin with the train starting in Chicago and going west. But for the Empire Builder, I would start it in Seattle going east, because probably the most scenic part of that trip is when the train goes over Marias Pass in Montana. And going west, I'm pretty sure it's mostly in darkness going west, but going east, it's in daylight. So I'd want to ride the daylight train to get Marias Pass during the day. So that documentary, when and if I ever do one, hopefully as time permits in the future, some like 10, 15, 20 years down the road, I would definitely take the train from Seattle going east for my documentary. Now, some other ones he mentions. Well, and then there's also the little, the baby Empire Builder from Portland to Spokane, down along the Columbia River. Can't forget that one. And the Coast Starlight. And the Sunset Limited. That's another one. From New Orleans to Los Angeles. Speaking of New Orleans, Amtrak is about ready to finally get their little train from New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama, running. And it's going to be called, they just announced the name just recently, it's going to be called the Mardi Gras. Not sure if that's a really, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting name for a train, but it's okay, it's not bad. But that train has been in the works for quite a while, and it's had a lot of hiccups and hurdles in the planning, but I think they're just about ready to get it ready to go. And that's going to be, I think it's going to be a twice daily train between New Orleans and Mobile on part of the former Sunset Limited route, which, of course, the Sunset Limited used to go all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. Then after Hurricane Katrina, the tracks were damaged and Amtrak suspended the train. CSX repaired the tracks, but Amtrak never returned for whatever reason. And now it'd be very difficult to run Amtrak all the way east to Florida because a lot of the tracks have changed owners and they've been downgraded below passenger service levels. So it'd be pretty difficult to run the Sunset Limited all the way across now. But all the stations are still there. I mean, the tracks are still there, but Amtrak just never came back after Hurricane Katrina. So the Sunset Limited just ends at New Orleans now. But the original Sunset Limited was that way too. It wasn't until I think it was the late 80s or early 90s that they extended it all the way to Orlando, if my memory serves me correctly. Dakota asks, in regards to my O-gauge trains, do you have a track plan in mind? Yes, it is going to be more of a around-the-room kind of track plan, where there's a main layout, and then the outer loop actually circles the perimeter of the room that the train is going to be in. So it's just kind of preliminary ideas. So there's going to be a main layout table with one of the inner loop and the train yard and some industries and stuff, and then the outer loop, which is probably going to be like the main line, which will go around pretty much the perimeter of the room. And it's going to be, I'm planning on there being like a bridge across the doorway to the room that you can lift out and put in, so you can get in the room without having to duck under the train tables. There might be some other little industries and stuff in like a separate town. I mean, it's a pretty big room that I'm planning on putting my trains in, so I have to stay tuned for all that. A-Train, in regards to the Gulf Coast train, which that was the preliminary name for the Mardi Gras service. He was worried that the Horizon, Amtrak's big Horizon fleet debacle would delay the train even more, and it probably has. For those of you that don't know, Amtrak's single-deck Horizon fleet cars were recently withdrawn from service because they had some serious structural issues in the frame of the cars that Amtrak didn't know about, or either they did know about and just kind of didn't tell anybody about. And yeah, I think the FRA got involved and they pretty much told Amtrak to pull the cars from service. And I don't know if they're going to be repaired or if they're just going to be retired. I don't know if they're too far gone to fix or what the deal is, but all Horizon fleet cars are no longer running on Amtrak trains, at least until they can find they can fix the problem, or unless they're retired completely, which I have a feeling that's probably going to happen. If Amtrak's let some maintenance kind of slip by and they're too far gone, they're probably just going to retire them. So they've kind of been scrambling for the past couple of weeks to send cars out on the Borealis route and out by the Pacific Northwest to fill in for where the Horizon cars were running, and kind of putting some shorter trains on specific routes, which isn't ideal, but at least they're still running the trains. So they're probably going to sell out. There's probably going to be not as much room on these trains. There's some newer train sets called the Arrows, that AIRO, Arrow, that should be starting to appear on Amtrak within the next year or so, I think. And once those are built, they're built by Siemens, just like the Venture cars. They're similar in design. Once those train sets start appearing, they will start alleviating the equipment shortages that Amtrak's having now. But like I said, they're probably going to be, a year or two down the road. So we're going to have to limp along with just Amfleet, the Ventures in the Midwest, and sometimes even superliners. Something else I heard recently, for the Borealis train, Amtrak is going to lease some of the Metro Transit North Star cars and engines for the Borealis trains. That'll be interesting once they get that going. Be interesting how that ride would be for several hours in those commuter seats. I've ridden on those Bombardier cars. They're pretty nice, but not the North Star cars specifically, but others. And they're nice for commuter runs, but I don't know if I'd be able to sit in one for 5-6 hours. But that would help that train out a lot. So the superliners could be distributed somewhere else that are currently operating on that train, because that was one of the trains that was running with Horizons. Now, along those lines, I think the Trinity Railway Express is going to be getting some of the North Star sets too. The North Star trains may not be running much longer. I think the ridership isn't very good, and they've been talking about shutting it down, so we'll see what happens there. Speaking of that, the Heartland Flyer, which is an Amtrak train that goes to Oklahoma City down to Fort Worth, it may not be running much longer either, because Texas has not allocated funding on their end to fund their portion of the train in Texas. So if they don't fund it, well, the train will essentially be done, because the only way for the Heartland Flyer to get to Fort Worth, obviously, is through Texas. So if Texas doesn't pony up their side of the money, I suppose Oklahoma could try and, raise funds for it. But if they don't, the Heartland Flyer may not be running much longer either. And that would be a real big blow for a lot of the rail advocates in Oklahoma. And there are a lot of them. They've been trying to get the Heartland Flyer extended up to Newton, Kansas for the longest time, to connect with the Southwest Chief and have a through train from Fort Worth to Kansas, so you can go straight up towards Chicago directly from Fort Worth without having to go up the Texas Eagle route. So I hope that Texas finds the money, or they don't end up defunding that portion of the train. Now, another train system that might be in danger, also in Texas, is the Dallas Area Rapid Transit System. They get a lot of their funding from the state, and I think there's a bill being pushed through that might eliminate a lot of that funding, which would seriously cut back operations on the DART lines in Dallas. And that's really a shame, because Texas, Dallas has invested so much in rail projects in the past 30 plus years, and they have a system that really is the envy of, cities all over the country. I mean, it's a great passenger rail system in North Texas. I mean, to cut the funding for that is it's ridiculous. But I'm not trying to get into politics here, which this is not a political channel, but it's just unfortunate that some politicians do not understand the importance of passenger rail in this country. On both sides of the aisle, we're not going to, single out one party or another, because they're both guilty of it. They just don't understand that a lot of people rely on these trains, and a lot of people choose to travel by trains for, many different reasons. Health reasons, they're afraid of flying, they don't want to drive. I mean, there's so many other reasons, but they're important. And, I'm a little biased because I'm a rail fan, but it's, trains are very important. Just like any other mode of transportation, we need to have a balanced transportation budget in this country. Trains are always kind of the underdog. They never seem to get a whole lot of funding or, attention, and they should. And we look at other countries around the world, and they have great rail networks. They also have you know, great highways and airlines. I mean, they all work together. I mean, every mode of transportation works together. When you have networks, robust networks, where every single mode of transportation is, you know, funded adequately, I mean, the system runs like clockwork. But it's hard to get people to get out of their cars here in the United States, which is unfortunate because we really pioneered a lot of the high-speed trains back in the 30s and 40s. Other countries got inspired by all of our fast streamliners. They, you know, the Japanese were inspired by the Zephyr train and other high-speed streamliners here in America, and they created the bullet train. And look at how their system is now. All right, guys. Well, I've been rambling a little bit. Little clock on the wall is telling me it's time to wrap things up for tonight. So we're going to do just that. We got to see Amtrak, got to chat in the chat for a little while. And we're going to go ahead and wrap things up until next time. So we will see you all next week, maybe on Thursday. We'll see. For Amtrak's birthday, we'll see how that goes. And we'll see you all next time. So, here at the station, this is Bobby Harvey saying so long, and we will see you next time here in Ottumwa along the tracks. So, bye for all now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.